I needed to remind her about their mother taking them away and changing her surname into something other than mine. It was not her maiden name, and what she did was for the purpose of keeping the children away from me, claiming I was disfellowshipped and therefore evil in every imaginable way. They left me. I still will not blame her mother, for I knew that Jehovah's Witnesses have been responsible for breaking my family while manipulating her naive character and childish mindset. Who knows, maybe her new name was just the same as her secret lover. She was forced into believing that every evil deed could be expected of people who were disfellowshipped like me, being seen with a black girl in the tram by the faithful sisters, or drawing the image of a half-naked girl in front of my children one morning. She was certainly under Jehovah's Witness-induced mind control, and I was completely ignored. During one other unusual meeting with my son at Burgett's, Claude asked me, would I ever recognize the only true God and come back to the truth? He avoided any eye contact with me, as I firmly told him that I would never, ever accept falsehood, and therefore would never be a part of the witnesses. That was my final answer, and I was not going to talk about it any more. After what I had experienced and all the lies told about me, I had no desire to be forced into joining something that had stolen my youth and destroyed my family. I was not the only casualty, for there are countless other broken families like mine due to Jehovah's Witness interference. Since my ex-wife was so conditioned to believe that people who were of the world, and therefore had to be against their God, all kinds of immorality, including extramarital affairs, could be expected of them. And this was apparently why Magda showed a great deal of jealousy towards me in case I looked at other women, especially when I drew the portrait of a girl. It was seen as if I was having an affair with her. We cannot wipe off the existence of the opposite gender. Wherever we are, working, studying, or just encountering them in our daily lives. Working with women in the office does not mean we are having affairs with them. Was she by any chance having affairs with other men in the office when we met all those years ago in Germany? However, Magda could not be spoken contrary to what she believed, and we had no communication since my disfellowshipment. All I remember is that Claude had been extraordinarily childish in his behavior and forced into being very naive when I met him after all those years, but there was always hope that he would one day wake up to the real truth. No matter what his attitude was towards me, I was not going to be offended, only wishing he would soon begin to understand the real issues of life as they were. When home, I stood in front of the framed drawing of his portrait, which I created, and asked his image what had happened to him, but he could not hear. John treated Claude as if he was his servant, and not as my son, telling me he needed a lot of discipline. What kind of discipline was he talking about? I wondered. Claude spoke to me of the worst thing one could imagine, but when he said what he wanted, Birgit looked very pleased. I cannot forget his words. I feel uneasy and embarrassed to call you Dad. I thought that perhaps I should not worry about meeting him ever again. Let him have a little time to think about where he stood. I was not going to bother him any more, and was certainly not going to be bothered with this new development either. This was more than enough. It seemed that I was not welcome in his life, and was certainly no longer encouraged to entertain the idea of having anything to do with him. He did not give a shit for his dad, did he? He had obviously become his mother's pet only, and a Jehovah's Witness child slave, could one trust Birgit about this issue? She later told me that he was in shock, and I should give him a little time. I responded, whether he really wants to get to know me or not, it will not make any difference, for I will always love him as my son, and when he is older he may become a little wiser and try to discover who I truly am, but I might be gone by then. In addition, Birgit responded, "You know why he is like that. You should know it. Do you know what I mean? By the way, Mom always speaks the truth. You know. You can always come back to the truth, Dad." Had I ever been in it? Did she really know what truth was? From then on, she repeated her words over and over again, every time we met, often telling me, "You can always come back to the truth. Remember, we are living in the last days." Her taking sides with Jehovah's Witnesses, and her lifestyle clearly obvious, it looked totally inappropriate for her to advise me, while indirectly telling me that I was the bad guy for not being in their truth and being disfellowshipped. What was she attempting to achieve? Was she preaching to me, like the rest of the witnesses? Repent, the end is nigh. Many years ago, a German friend told me something in regard to liars, which I can never forget. Once lied, forever untrusted. How right he was. One thing was an absolute certainty. Jehovah's Witnesses lie all the time, and try to convince themselves that what is imagined is true. They joined the UN, and for a long time denied this. However, they could no longer hide it from their congregations, and their excuse is that they want to have access to the UN's libraries. But the UN informs inquirers that there is no need for them to become members to access their libraries. One asks why the witnesses have seen fit to hide it. It is also fascinating to note that they consider the UN as the infamous harlot which the Bible speaks of. According to reliable information, they have begun to sell many of their kingdom halls, as they are supposedly combining congregations because their membership is diminishing, yet they eagerly claim that their numbers are increasing. Many Jehovah's Witnesses now realize that they have been guided to live in falsehood. Their so-called prophecies regarding the end of the world and Armageddon have never happened, as so often preached. They believe and preach about many fabricated lies under the banner of truth, and if only one lie is exposed, how can one trust and believe anything they promote? People are beginning to wake up to the real truth. In the circumstances, I regretted meeting Birgit. She was not helping any of us by being so extreme and biased towards me. Then again, was it not what her mother desired, so that they could all be saved at the end of the world, without any satanic influence through their father, the evil one? I suppose all the witnesses I have encountered felt fulfilled in their grand achievement. They certainly knew how to manipulate the naive and destroy families. I still cannot forget how eager Birgit was in inviting me to go with her to their kingdom hall to show me what a wonderful reception I would receive. Despite everything I told her in regard to being shunned, due to being disfellowshipped, she obviously did not believe, or at best ignored me. Has she been able to comprehend that I was truthful about how they would react to me? Instead of seeing my viewpoint, she tried to teach me why they behaved the way they did when I went there with her. I was invisible and completely ignored, as I had experienced long before. Later she demanded that we went into the city to see the film Silence of the Lambs, expecting that I would enjoy the ugliness and gore which she loved to see for a second time. For somebody who apparently enjoyed peaceful things, as she tried to tell me, just the way her mother supposedly desired, it was unusual. I cannot forget when she admitted how she attempted to burn my belongings before voluntarily leaving to live with her mother. She was absolutely decisive not to believe in anything I said without any respect to me, completely undermining my dignity. It still hurts. She obviously considered me as naught else than a completely ignorant and itinerant liar. That was most certainly due to being hypnotized by being constantly subjected to the same dictum for an extensive time, and it had become one of her personal trends. It seemed that nothing in the world would change it. In fact, she presented a relentless mindset that she would do everything possible to declare herself always true, even when completely wrong. The whole situation was forcing me to disappear from their lives, never to be seen again. I do not think that her mother would be very happy after discovering that she had been fed with her daughter's lies if she has not already discovered it. I still wonder how she could douse my electronic equipment, expensive books, and furniture with petrol, as she freely admitted, regretting that the matches did not light. If everything would go up in flames, and she escaped the fire, how would she live with what she did? I still believe it was an advice from the most brainless and utterly superstitious people practicing Jehovah's Witnesses. I find it hard to believe that her mother was the original culprit behind the whole attempt to destroy me altogether. Who indeed was following the greatest evildoer, and who was the devil worshipper? It still is very hard to understand how extremely superstitious the Strohbachs were, burning the expensive articles my mother sent me. They did so behind my back all those years ago, long after telling me how and why they did so, believing my mother was a witch. But she was not. Her only sin was not being interested in Jehovah's Witness truth. Nor can I forget how Magda was burning some of my books, later admitting to have done so, pressurizing me to get rid of my charmed things of evil, such as science fiction literature, if I wanted to keep my family together, and if I loved her. When I asked Birgit whether she had been knowledgeable of my living in Perth and having a studio shop in Victoria Park, and if she had noticed my advertisements in the papers, radio, and on television, she answered that she could not remember. I told her that I was also working there as a radio jockey on one of the Perth radio stations. She answered me with, "Yeah, I remember Mom used to cut many articles and advertisements from the newspapers." I did not know why she was doing so. Later she added, "Oh, I remembered now. Once Mom said, 'Oh, mein Gott, your father has found us.'" However, I was unsure whether it was yet again one of her lies. It was also during this time when a friend of mine, who happened to be the president of the Theosophical Society, invited me to attend a special Buddhist ceremony in North Melbourne, where some of the monks took pictures of people being accepted into their midst. It was almost like a baptism, after reciting certain mantras, and guests were encouraged to recite the words individually, which phonetically sounded like "Hutai for me lei," although the actual words were not written in that manner. But that pronunciation was close enough. We were advised not to utter it outside the circle, and only use it privately, or within designated Buddhist temples. They kept taking photographs. When they printed, some showed additional images of long and short color streaks and spheres. Whenever my images were captured, there were no such inclusions. Apparently those who were really spiritual and accepted by the adepts had those added imagery in their photographs. However, when my friend had invited me in the first place, he did so after seeing some of my photographs, which Editha had proudly been showing around. We had captured phantom images of my beloved cat Lucky after the animal had died. Maybe Lucky was trying to relay a message to people left behind, probably saying he loved them. Indeed, those kinds of images have been captured by others on virgin film in the past, like I have done, and tests revealed them to be authentic, although they appeared like double exposures. I have no proper answer how they were technically done, with only one click of the shutter. Some of my student friends attending that occasion have also been meeting at Melbourne University, where I have taken part in those gatherings. It was an interesting study, alas, some of them seeing me with Birgit in the city did not want to greet me any longer, and later I discovered that devout Buddhists were expected to be celibate. Obviously, they did not realize that she was my daughter. When at the university, I felt the need to clarify the preconceived thoughts of some inquisitive minds. When I met Birgit on another occasion, she offered me a book she had been given, advising me that I might learn something from it. It was a little book with the title True Peace and Security, published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, 1986. I asked her if she had learned something from it, but she responded with silence. She probably hoped that by reading it I would become wise and accept the truth. I browsed through its pages, particularly page 173, and started reading it to her while she prepared some Lipton tea for us. A wife, too, can make a major contribution to the family. The cooperation with her husband and her wise use of time in molding their children's lives in a godly way is usually reflected in the conduct and attitude of the children. Proverbs 29:15. Even where there is no father in the home, careful teaching from the Bible, coupled with fine example, yields good results. She either listened half-heartedly or did not feel the need to listen to me, as she kept talking about completely irrelevant issues of no substance. Then I read further. But if the father who is in the home does not accept God's word, or even persecutes his wife, what should she do? If she loves Jehovah, she certainly will not turn her back on him. It is Satan who charged that humans would forsake God if subjected to hardship. She surely does not want to be doing Satan's bidding. Job 2:1-5, Proverbs 27:11. Furthermore, by continuing to honor her marriage vows, even under difficulty, she shows her deep respect for the author of marriage, Jehovah God. We will receive love if we practice showing love to others. Luke 6:38. However, I thought maybe in this instance the reference to the author of marriage needs to be replaced with the destroyer of marriage, because many people have experienced exactly that after their disfellowshipment. Do Jehovah's Witnesses really show genuine love to others? One naturally wonders. By observing my daughter Birgit and son Claude having been totally alienated and turned completely against me, was it also part of the godly practice? It was so unusual to see a completely blank look on her face. She was surprised that I even cared to make an effort to read those sentences to her. But if she was as clever as she wanted to appear, she would understand why I read them. If I attempted to read something like that to Magda, she would shout at me, asking, "How dare you read the word of God, you devil?" On another occasion, I suggested Birgit read Proverbs chapter 14, or just make mention of it to her beloved mother. This is the Bible text her mother once did not want to hear after listening to the lecture at a district assembly. She might have felt very dutiful. It reads, "Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. The poor is hated even of his own neighbor, but the rich hath many friends. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Wisdom resteth in the heart of him that hath understanding, but he that which is in the midst of fools is made known." One hopes that those who judge others while believing themselves to be the only righteous ones, allegedly following Bible principles, would take note of what is written before trying to preach it. By befriending people and then dumping them so that those judged by the witnesses feel the wrath of their God, having no friends to turn to, cannot be righteous. Neither turning one's family against oneself can be a God-pleasing attitude. A little understanding can go a long way. People are not brainless, unable to think, and incapable of finding solutions to all kinds of problems they may face. Faithfulness does not require adherence to any cult. Luckily, some of us belong to groups of humans who are free thinkers without attachment to any belief system of fanaticism the world is accustomed to. If you notice, witnesses love to appear well-educated and professional at all times, and tend to make specialized comments as if they know the answers, although they do not have a clue. They never hesitate to tell untruths without realizing that they are doing so because their ministers and elders told them. I believe Claude was experiencing severe confusion, not knowing where to turn. He might or might not have been encouraged to be in touch with his father, or help him realize his ways being wrong according to the cultist training forced upon him, as with his sister Birgit during his childhood, perhaps believing he could help save his father's life. This way the whole of his family would unite as one. He could not see any solution, feeling obligated to help open his dad's eyes to the truth which he was obliged to adhere to. In fact, some of his biased viewpoints in regard to my being wicked as part of an evil world were very obvious and extreme. I wondered if it was not a way of falsely judging me, the other human person, in accordance with Jehovah's Witness teachings, through his mother, who was always against his father. Following my move to Chelsea Heights, Claude visited me once or twice, probably a little disturbed about me living there with Editha and her son Robert, without realizing that I was not in any relationship with her. Once, when visiting me, he grabbed Robert by his ankles, holding him upside down for a joke, while the little one cackled. Editha looked perturbed, and I could not wait until Claude put him down gently. When he did, I heard Robert shout, "Phew, you smell like sweat." And Claude responded with, "Yeah, it is the real man's smell." I cannot forget those moments. In regard to his being a part of the religious movement, Editha was only too pleased to talk about her once-upon-a-time involvement with them, thus surprising him immensely. While I was living in Springvale, he would briefly visit me when in Victoria. By that time Birgit had moved to Perth, to be closer to her beloved mother, but I believe she had other reasons, and told me nothing about it. She told me, when I met her for one last time in the city, that John wanted to live in Perth. From then on she kept sending me her daughter's photographs, occasionally posting cassette tapes containing more recent music she had copied from her audio discs. She wrote to me about her newborn twins, sending their pictures and always mentioned what a lovely man John was. Whenever I met Claude, he never spoke anything positive about John's attitude towards him, treating him like a toddler. I was to learn much later that John had supposedly either been punching or kicking Birgit's tummy while she was pregnant with her twins and treating her badly. Obviously, his Vietnam War days would have left him with a degree of psychological trauma. However, this story might have been invented to paint him as black as possible for reasons known only to Birgit. Then again, I hardly had any communication with him. Therefore, everything I knew about him was gleaned from what I had heard and observed when visiting Birgit in St. Kilda. Claude and John had kept away from me, spending most of their time in the kitchen. However, when I discreetly psychoanalyzed him, on occasions I discovered similar trends as many witnesses display, which is mild sluggishness in remembering things. The observed fact is a total reversal from the traditional mindset and mental dullness when they are freed from the Jehovah's Witness bondage. One day Claude came to visit me, visibly shaken and frightened. After a short black Turkish coffee, which calmed him down, he told me how a UFO was chasing him, and felt that I might have some explanation about what the reason could be behind it. I made mention of a number of known facts, advising him that there was no need to be alarmed, but he responded with a sigh and said, "I thought you had something to do with it, Dad, because you do strange things, like magic." I felt obliged to explain that I was interested in science, technology, and helping people understand themselves, and not in make-believe stories. But I knew that he was not able to accept what I said as a truth statement, for he was most certainly trained to believe that only Jehovah's Witnesses and his mother spoke the truth. Being completely inattentive to what was being explained, he would, no doubt, forget the whole thing anyway. Another time he told me all about his car and how expensive the blue metallic paint job was. He said he was staying somewhere in Victoria with a farming family who were also witnesses and in the truth, but for some reason he did not disclose their whereabouts. He told me how hateful they were to him. Some people accused him of having grey eyes, which were probably like his father's evil eyes. However, how did they know his grey eyes were evil, and how did they know whether I had grey eyes or not? Who could have told them something like that? Besides, they have never met me, and what did they know about me, unless they were psychic? My eyes are dark brown, and his mother's eyes have similar tones to his. I was so surprised yet again how superstitious some people could be. According to some others, they had threatened him at gunpoint, telling him to go away after literally disassembling his car on their farm with the excuse that he owed them money, which apparently he did not. Were they really in the truth, as Claude said, or were they only studying the Bible? One could not tell. I could only consider how unethical those people were. One would hope that he had enough sense to comprehend the situation. Would he consider remaining within that organization after what he had experienced? However, Some of the experiences contained in the previous paragraph have later been denied, although I have always carefully recorded everything experienced, documenting significant events and developments in my life, almost immediately in my well-kept diaries. If for some reason the information presented herein on an as-is basis is wrong, it was not deliberately altered to paint a scene of ugliness, for I have never believed in falsehood due to my personal convictions. I do not believe in lies, contrary to what some members of my family have loosely classified me in their biased judgment on their instructions according to the Jehovah's Witness faith. They are so convinced of being the only righteous people speaking the truth. If there was such a righteous God, and Jehovah's Witnesses were only those I have been knowledgeable of, there can be no reason for me to believe in that jealousy-stricken, restrictive, wrathful, and fanatical deity created by people forcing their way to prove their supremacy, allegedly following the Bible, created by man of wisdom and great intelligence. Surely it is far better to believe in nothing like this and be free from dogma of any kind. In absolute truth, it is far better to be called an atheist than being classified as belonging to a man-made belief system of untruths. The experience reminded me of the time when Annette insisted on staying with her friend, the daughter of a family belonging to another cult, as mentioned elsewhere, and who were formerly involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, and who had abducted her. When visiting them at their farm in relation to Annette's disappearance, the police and I were threatened at gunpoint. It still amazes me to discover what kind of negative behavior can be expected from people involved with Jehovah's Witnesses who preach about non-violence, supposedly following Jesus' teachings. To tell you the honest truth, witnesses are preachers of falsehood. I am not saying this lightly, and certainly not in a discriminative way. Consider some of their teachings and avoidance when needing to clarify matters which they are not comfortable with. I had a number of their publications forced on me by Magda, or subsequently given to me by her brothers, explaining some of their claims which are enough to turn anybody with some intelligence away. After associating with them for a considerable time and being married to one, it gave me an opportunity to get to know them well. One thing I learned was that the Jehovah's Witness organization deliberately keeps everybody in complete darkness. You are not meant to question their teachings. Many still prefer to pretend to know the truth, just like the controllers at their headquarters. In the dictionary, pretense is described as an attempt to make something that is not the case appear true. This is exactly what the witnesses do. I am hoping that what I am about to explain will not be taken as preaching. There are scriptures in the Bible which the Jehovah's Witness organization and their governing body do not want adherers to know anything about. There is a publication under the title of Reasoning from the Scriptures, and there is an intriguing passage on page 216, number 8, where it says, "Last days. We are living now since 1914. In the last days of this wicked system of things, that some who saw the event of 1914 will also see the complete destruction of the present wicked world. That lovers of righteousness will survive into a cleansed earth." This is interesting, for we are left dangling somewhere regarding the witnesses being described as the lovers of righteousness. But their deeds speak loud and clear that they are not what they present themselves to be. Interestingly, many who saw those events of 1914 have since died through natural attrition. Maybe we should look at their Watchtower magazine of May 1984 and discover a number of issues regarding their teachings. However, Armageddon and the paradise which was to follow did not happen within this generation. I am sure that the witnesses are clever enough to notice this and know that there are some who are disfellowshipped like me and are cognizant about it. I queried a number of issues with their elders, but instead of clarifying matters, they preferred to chastise me, warning me regarding the dangers of questioning the Spirit. My understanding of their response was, therefore, to avoid answering something they had no idea about. This eventually led their judicial committee to disfellowship me. I intend to examine some Bible texts to explain my questions. When one reads Deuteronomy 18, verses 20 and 22, particularly New World Edition, which is their interpretation, we discover, if any prophet presumptuously speaks a word in my name that I did not command him to speak, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet must die. However, you may say in your heart, how will we know that Jehovah has not spoken the word? When the prophet speaks in the name of Jehovah, and the word is not fulfilled, or does not come true, then Jehovah did not speak that word. The prophet spoke it presumptuously. You should not fear him. How can we know if the Watchtower Society speaks the truth? So far they have spoken of things which never came to pass. In Deuteronomy 18, 18-20, we discover this. True prophets speak in the name of God, but merely claiming to represent him is not enough. Verse 22 is avoided for some reason, and this may be because presumptuously speaking is the biblical definition of false prophet. Watchtower article once contained an interesting heading, They shall know a prophet was among them. Does Jehovah have a prophet to help them, to warn them of danger and declare things to come? Who is this prophet? Again, Watchtower magazine, April 1st, 1972, published these words. This prophet was not one man, but was a body of men and women. It was the small group of footstep followers of Jesus Christ, known at that time as the International Bible Students. Today they are known as Jehovah's Christian Witnesses. As any thinking intellectual can understand, they obviously twist the truth in pretense, or prophesy, speaking presumptuously.